Hi everyone, welcome back to the Raised Bed Garden series. On today's video, I'm going to share with you how to plant a salsa garden in this 2x4 raised bed right behind me here. Now, if you're a brand new gardener or a first-time raised bed gardener, a theme garden is a great way to start. And what that is you're growing vegetables for a specific recipe or type of cuisine. You're starting very simple so you don't get overwhelmed. Now, we're going to be doing several theme gardens throughout this raised bed garden series, but I thought a salsa one is a great one to start with. I mean, who doesn't love fresh salsa? The taste of fresh tomatoes, fresh peppers, onions, and cilantro all blended in to one delicious bowl of salsa. So let's jump into the video. One thing that makes growing a salsa garden so easy and so fun is you only need to grow 4 different crops. So the first one is tomatoes. I'm going to put 2 different types of tomatoes in my salsa garden. The second one being peppers. I've got a sweet pepper and a hot pepper. The third crop is onions. And I like to grow the little bunching onions. They're like little green onions. They're very easy to grow. The fourth one is actually an herb, and that is cilantro. I'm growing my salsa garden in a 2x4 raised bed. This is the Smart Pots fabric raised bed, and it's got a PVC frame. You basically just pop it up, fill it with soil. You've got an instant garden. You could also grow it in a 4x4 raised bed or even in a 4x8 raised bed if you really like salsa and you want to grow a lot. And you want to place your salsa garden in full sun. So that means 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. These are warm weather loving vegetables. In full on sun, they're going to grow you lots of veggies, which means lots and lots of salsa for you. The first vegetable I'm going to plant in my salsa garden is a tomato. This is one of my favorites, a golden Jubilee tomato from my salsa garden seed collection. And when you're growing a full size tomato like the golden Jubilee is, you want to plant it on the northernmost side of your raised bed. That is, if you're in the northern hemisphere, so it doesn't shade out the smaller plants. So first what I'm going to do is dig a hole for my golden Jubilee tomato in the corner of the garden bed. I'm going to dig kind of a deep hole because tomatoes you want to plant very deep, because wherever the stem touches the soil, it's going to send out roots. So we're only going to leave a little bit of the top of the tomato plant sticking out. We already have refreshed and amended this raised bed soil. We did that on last week's video. So go back and check that out so you have all the details. We put some good compost, some granular fertilizer, and some worm castings in this soil. It's nice and black and beautiful. Look at this stuff. I am going to add another little handful of the worm castings. I do like to add this to just about every planting hole when I plant a fresh seedling. I'm going to grab my golden Jubilee. And these were started from seed indoors. I want to say about 8 weeks ago or so, and they're just about the right size for transplanting. So we'll pop one out, the 6-pack. And you can see there's 3 little seedlings here, but you can easily separate a tomato seedling just by kind of pulling it apart there. Save those for another spot in the garden. And then we're going to plant this little golden Jubilee tomato seedling deep into the hole. And just leave the top leaves here sticking out. Fill it in. Looks pretty small now, but man, it's going to grow fast. Now, because our golden Jubilee tomato is a large vining vegetable, it definitely needs some support. Now, we are going to be covering other DIY trellises in this series, but for this particular tomato, I'm just going to use a tomato cage from the garden center. And my tomato plant will definitely outgrow this cage. So what I'm going to do as it grows is add a second layer, a second tomato cage, inverted, cut off the prongs, and then attach the 2 with cable ties, and that should provide it with plenty of support. Now, I do like to install all of my supports as I plant my vegetables. That way, the roots aren't disturbed later. Now, I like to have at least 2 different colors of tomatoes in my salsa, but I don't have room in this 2x4 bed for another full-size tomato plant. So I'm going to pop in one of my Tiny Tim tomatoes. I love this tomato. It's a small little dwarf tomato, only about 2 feet tall. It's going to be a perfect complement to the golden Jubilee in my salsa. Now, seeds for this are in my container garden seed collection. I started these from seed indoors about 8 weeks or so ago. So I'm just going to pull out one of these little seedlings, and we're going to put it in the opposite corner of this 2x4 raised bed. So the golden Jubilee has plenty of space. So we've got our hole dug. I'm adding in some of the Vermistera worm castings. Pop our Tiny Tim in. And since Tiny Tim is a much smaller size tomato, just have this small tomato cage, which will give it plenty of support. The next crop we're going to plant in our salsa garden is cilantro. Now I happen to love cilantro and I love it in my salsa, but some people think that cilantro tastes like soap. So if you're one of those people, then don't plant cilantro in your garden. Now cilantro seeds have a very hard outer shell and they can take quite a while to germinate. So you can either soak your seeds overnight to soften that hard outer shell, make germination easier, but I usually forget to do that. So what I'm going to do here is just crush my seeds with this brick to break that hard outer shell. Open up the seeds just a little bit, and that way they'll be easier to germinate. Now cilantro is a cool weather herb, so it likes temperatures under 80 degrees best. So it can be just a little bit tricky to grow in a salsa garden because when the temperatures get too hot, it shoots up a tall stalk from the middle, that's called bolting, and it starts to flower and go to seed. But even if that does happen in your salsa garden, the bees absolutely love the flowers, so it's no huge loss. However, a little strategy to keep it cooler in hot weather is to plant it in the shade of the taller plants. So I'm going to plant it in between the golden jubilee and the tiny Tim, right up against the back of the garden bed, right near the drip irrigation hose to help it stay cooler and keep it hydrated in warm weather. So I'm just going to sprinkle the seeds right along the drip irrigation hose. And cilantro can take up to a couple of weeks to germinate, so just be patient, hang in there. Pretty soon you'll see the seedlings popping through the soil and you'll be able to add your cilantro to your fresh salsa. Next up in the salsa garden, the peppers. What would salsa be without fresh, tasty peppers? So I like to plant both a sweet pepper and a hot pepper in my salsa garden. The first one I'm going to plant is a sweet pepper. It's a California Wonder. This is in the salsa seed collection. These are beautiful, thick-walled red peppers, one of my very favorites. And these peppers were started from seed indoors about 10 weeks ago. They're growing absolutely beautifully. You don't want to get your plants out in the garden for your salsa garden until after your last frost day, because these are all warm weather vegetables and they're not going to survive a frost. So we're all good on that here in Southern California. We haven't had any frost this winter. Now with peppers, you don't want to bury them deep like you do tomatoes. You can plant them right at soil level. So I've already dug the hole. So I'm just going to backfill the hole with soil, tamp it down, and add a small tomato cage for support because the peppers get plenty heavy when they're loaded down. Now peppers can actually be planted about a foot or so apart. So I'm just going to pop my jalapeno here in the hole right next to the California Wonder. They actually like to kind of touch as they grow. For some reason, it just kind of helps them grow better. And then it shades out the peppers themselves so they don't get sun scald in the hot weather. Now here you can see I've got 2 seedlings in my seed cell. Just going to break it apart. And these are a mild jalapeno. These are actually in my new raised bed kitchen garden seed collection. But my salsa seed collection has a hotter variety of pepper, the yellow hot banana pepper. So just, you know, plant your salsa garden to your taste, whatever you like. We've got our tomatoes, our peppers, our cilantro. The 4th crop we're going to plant in our salsa garden are our onions. Now, I like to plant bunching onions because they're a whole lot easier to grow than the bulbing up onions. They grow a lot quicker. And because we have a smaller space here, they're going to work really well for the space. Now, you can grow bunching onions from transplants like I do here. These were started indoors about 8 weeks or so ago. Or you can plant seeds directly in your garden beds, and I'm going to do both. So I'm just going to dig some of these tiny little onions out of the seedling tray. Now bunching onions are virtually indestructible and they actually like to be planted in bunches. So I'm just going to take a couple of the little seedlings here and plant them right along the drip emitter so they get plenty of water. They're a perfect little plant to grow along the edge of your garden beds. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of tucking the roots here into the soil, kind of lightly covering it up and spacing my little bunches just a few inches apart. And I'm also going to plant some of the bunching onion seeds from my salsa seed collection. That way I have onions ready at different times. Just lightly sprinkling in the seeds, lightly covering them up, and we're good to go. The last thing we need to do now that we have our salsa garden planted is water, fertilize, and mulch. Now we did add some amendments or some fertilizers when we refreshed the soil, but those were time-release fertilizers that will feed your garden over the next couple of months. I want to add some water-soluble fertilizers that are immediately available to the plants so the plants can take up the nutrients and grow and get off to a really good start. So I'm using my go-to Good Dirt plant food. It's high in nitrogen, so the plants will get a good burst of nice leafy growth right off the bat. I can add some to my watering can. And I also like to water with the Vitality or the Vermistera worm tea. This is like worm castings in a bottle, has natural growth hormones, and it really helps the plants be healthy and happy and just grow really well right off the bat. So I add those to my watering can. Just gonna mix it up and then give my plants a nice, good little soaking. So I'm just pouring the water at the base of the plant so it soaks down into the roots, letting it kind of puddle up, sink in, and then water again so they get a nice deep drink. Now I'm just going to spread a couple inches of shredded leaf mulch over the top of the soil here. Helps keep the soil cooler, helps retain water better in the heat of the summer. And these shredded leaves have been sitting outside all winter. They're really breaking down nicely. It's almost like a little extra layer of compost on top of my plants. It always feels good to sit down and relax after a morning out in the garden, don't you think? Well, follow along with me in the Raised Bed Garden series. We'll also be doing several other theme gardens as we go throughout the series. And they're all detailed out in my book, The First Time Gardener Raised Bed Gardening. You can grab a signed copy over on my website. And when you grab it with the seed book bundle, this is the Raised Bed Kitchen Garden seed book bundle, you'll save $5. And you can also grab one of my salsa seed collections as well. So comment down below, let me know if you're going to be planting a salsa garden and if you're going to be growing along in the Raised Bed Garden series with me. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.